All right, let's dive in. Today, we're basically going to be intellectual detectives. We're setting off on this epic quest to trace how we even began to try and understand the most complicated thing we know of, the human mind. Let's get started.
It really all boils down to this one huge universal question. This is the central mystery that has kept thinkers, philosophers, and scientists busy for literally thousands of years. It's the question that sits at the heart of every single school of psychological thought from the very beginning all the way up to today.
So, where do we even start our journey? Well, we have to go way, way back to ancient Greece. Long before psychology was a formal science with labs and studies, the first real attempts to answer our big question were born out of philosophy. And back then, the question wasn't just why do we act the way we do, but how can we act in a way that leads to a good life? So, what was Plato's answer? He had this incredible idea that we're actually born with all the knowledge we'll ever need. For Plato, the soul was this mix of mind, will, and emotions. He believed that real learning wasn't about cramming new information into your brain. Nope. It was about looking inward, reflecting, contemplating, to unlock the truth that's already inside all of us. Then comes Plato's student, Aristotle, who takes that idea and just runs with it. He kind of evolved it. He shifted the focus from just thinking about things to actually doing things in the real world. For Aristotle, the real key to human flourishing, what he called eudaimonia, was all about the consistent practice of virtues. You don't just think your way to a good life. You have to live it through your actions by being courageous and honest day in and day out. And this is the really big takeaway from the Greeks, this chain of inquiry. Aristotle didn't just toss Plato's ideas out the window. He built on them. He refined them. And this powerful principle that knowledge builds upon knowledge is basically the engine that's going to drive this entire story. So let's see how that engine fueled the next big leap. Okay, so let's hit the fast forward button, jumping ahead a few centuries to the Enlightenment. This was a time of huge intellectual change, and the big question starts to shift. It moves away from the philosophical, how do we live a good life, to something a little more mechanical. How does the human mind actually work? And this is where René Descartes enters the picture with this absolutely revolutionary concept he called dualism. He basically said, look, the mind and the body are two totally separate things. He argued the body is just a physical machine, right? But the mind, that's something else entirely, something immaterial that's in the driver's seat. And this was a total game changer because it gave people permission to study the mind as its own unique thing. Now, building on this, John Locke comes along and offers a completely different take. He said, no, we are not born with knowledge. Instead, he laid out this empirical chain. As you see here, it starts with life experiences. Those experiences give us bodily sensations, which then leave these little impressions on our minds. And boom, from those impressions, ideas are born. It's this whole new way of seeing the mind as a machine that processes the world around. So, you take all of this, the Greek philosophies, the ideas from Descartes and Locke, and it all leads to this massive, pivotal moment. This is when psychology finally steps out from the shadow of its parents, philosophy and biology, to become its very own science. This timeline really gives you a sense of how quickly things started to pick up steam. You go from Locke's early ideas back in the 1600s all the way to Wilhelm Wundt, who was the first person to actually call himself a psychologist, setting up the field as a real science in the 1800s. And then by 1920, both Wundt and his American counterpart William James are gone, but not before they launched the first two major schools of thought that would shape everything that came next. So let's start with Wundt's vision. His school of thought, structuralism, had a really clear goal. He wanted to map the mind. He wanted to break down consciousness into its most basic parts, the structures that make up our mental world. You can almost think of it like he was trying to create a periodic table of elements, but for our inner experience. But, almost as soon as structuralism was established, a competing idea popped up, thanks to William James. His school, functionalism, was super influenced by Darwin's theory of evolution. See, James wasn't that interested in what the mind was made of. He wanted to know its purpose. He was asking, what is consciousness for? How does it help us adapt to the world and, survive? And right here, you can see the two competing visions side by side, crystal clear. On one side, you've got Wundt's structuralism asking, what are the components of consciousness? And on the other, you have James's functionalism asking, yeah, but what is the purpose of consciousness?
This disagreement really set the stage for a huge intellectual battle over what this new science of psychology should even be.
And let me tell you, this was not some polite, friendly academic chat. It was intense. This quote from Wundt about James's work just says it all. He's basically saying that functionalism is nice to read, it's beautiful like literature, but it is not the rigorous, hard science that he thought psychology needed to be. Ouch.
Now, here's the really cool part. This historical clash, this whole showdown, it maps directly onto one of the most famous debates in all of psychology. Once structuralism, with its focus on the built-in parts of the mind, laid the tracks for the nature side of the argument. And James's functionalism, with its focus on adapting to the environment, set the stage for the nurture side.
So, where did all this fighting leave us? Did one side just win? Well, the answer is way more interesting than that. It turns out, no. Instead, this initial conflict is what created such a rich and diverse field, with tons of different ways to see the human mind. You see, the debate between Wundt and James didn't lead to one clear winner. It was more like it opened the floodgates. From those early foundations, a whole bunch of new perspectives started to emerge. You got the behaviorists, who focused only on what you can see and measure, the psychoanalytical school, diving deep into the unconscious, and the cognitive, humanistic, and sociocultural schools, each one offering its own unique angle. This image just perfectly captures how modern psychology thinks about all these different schools. They're not seen as being in competition anymore. Instead, they're like different lenses or perspectives. Imagine a bunch of people standing all around a mountain. They're all looking at the same landscape, but each person has a totally unique vantage point. That's kind of how modern psychology works. So what's the big takeaway here? That long quest to answer why we do what we do didn't give us one simple final answer. And maybe that's a good thing, because the journey itself gave us something way more valuable, a powerful, diverse toolbox of perspectives that we can use to better understand ourselves and to better understand each other. We've just traced this incredible journey, right? All the way from ancient philosophy to the birth of a brand new science. So I'll just leave you with this final thought to chew on. We've talked about the foundational lenses for understanding the human mind. Which one do you feel like you naturally see the world through?